Thank you very much, and good morning for everyone. It's a huge honor to be here and to speak. Today, we are not expected that the end of history is going to be in this European part of the world. But we had many discussions before with organizers of this conference that it's good to share experience of my organization and my colleagues with your auditory, with this audience, because you are very well developed organization with a huge capacity in electoral democracy, in electoral integrity, and in election observation. But after February 24th, everything changed. Russia attacked on Russia's authoritarian regime, attacked democratic Ukraine, and now we understood that democracy doesn't matter if you can't fight and defend yourselves, and if you can join in and other democratic states or build coalitions with them for your common perspective to reload the history after the Second World War. This is not only a topic for academic and politicians, science discussions, but also an important part for the global security system. As you might know, Ukraine is a fully developed electoral democracy. According to the Economist ratings of democracy, we had a huge score as many other EU countries because of the very well developed democracy in Ukraine. But it doesn't mean that you are in security area if you will have such neighbor as Russia or other authoritarian or even totalitarian regime near your borders. In recent months, I have wondering how many parallels could be traced between the actions of the Putin's Russia and those of Soviet Union. I will not hold any intrigue. We can find very many common things, and every aggressive state against Ukraine's statehood and its people already happened sometimes before in other type of Russia as a part of Soviet Union. The struggle for Ukrainian identity and independence did not end in 1991. Neither did Russia attempt to reclaim Ukraine and return it into their sphere of influence. To understand the scale of grief and problems and the true strategic goal of the Russian Federation, we will have to go back almost 100 years. The Russian Federation will never be able to accept the fact that other nations have the right to self-determination and that they exist outside the jurisdiction of the Kremlin. Those buildings are still toward a large red star. The artificial famine of 1932-1933 was a real act of genocide against the Ukrainian people, and it was organized by the totalitarian regime of the Soviet Union. More than 4 million Ukrainians were killed by starvation on the fertile land of Ukraine. If you count the unborn children, the number gets even more horrible. Did you hear yesterday, a few days before, the speech of one of the very well-known Russian propagandists from Russia Today? What she said? She said that there is only one hope to win the war with Ukraine, to use this famine issue, which will happen with some of the African countries because of food crisis, because of Russian aggression against Ukraine. And she believes, as Putin and Kremlin, that this is a good tool to change the mood in between democratic countries, because all of them has its own value, and the life of the people sometimes is more valued than the life of the people because of the war in Ukraine. This is an issue and this is a problem. The totalitarian regime closed the border and denied access to information about the real tragedies of the Ukrainian people, and it filled Western media with propaganda. From the 1930s till the 1980s, the genocide was silent and denied, including by the Western intellectuals who took part in one of the largest campaigns of misinformation and big lies. What we have now, I believe that we have to do our work and to lessons learned from our history, because now Russia is using the same tools against other nations than USSR did many, many years ago. And misinformation against people, their rights, their lives, or again the joining the world, again the bad side. It's the same what was happening many, many years ago, uh, as I mentioned, during famine period in Ukraine, early 20th century. Today we can access news in a real time online about decision of the Russian authorities to expropriate millions of tons of Ukrainian grain, agricultural machinery, and product from the temporary occupied territories in the south of Ukraine. We can watch online how Ukrainian bread is brought to the territory of Russia, and farmers in Kherson region are forced to plant crops that they will not have the right to harvest or sell. Moscow will take possession of everything if the Ukrainian army does not succeed to reclaim this land by autumn. However, unfortunately, they will find evidence of the same horrors we saw in Bucha, Irpin, Borodyanka, Mariupol. Hundreds or thousands of graves will be found with Ukrainian people tortured to death. Satellite images of the victim with their hands tied have been found in the streets of the liberated cities in Kiev region and can be seen by everyone. But even in our days, conditions of digital transparency, the Russian government refuses to tell the truth. We already know the names of the military personnel who were allegedly involved in the war crimes in the liberated cities. President Vladimir Putin awarded the 64th of Brigade that in March occupied Bucha and the Kiev region with the honorary title of the Guards. This brigade was involved in the war crimes in Bucha. So they are heroes for their country and for the authorities of Russia. It's a really horrible pages of the current story, and we have to remember that this lie will be a part of the future solution if we will not talk about that as loud as it's possible. Citizens of Ukraine are being tortured in the 21st century simply because Russians seek revenge over Ukrainians for the fact that they exist with their own distinct identity, culture, and aspiration to establish a democratic regime in the modern world. So it's just revenge of authoritarian regime against fully developed electoral democracy in Ukraine. Of course, Ukraine is not the ideal state. We have some problems with rule of law, but we have totally democratic processes during elections and in between elections, with different parties, with different positions, with different ideology, with freedom of speech, with free and fair elections, and so on and so forth. And inside the country, the electoral democracy is a security for our own people, because we know if the president will do bad things, this person will not be re-elected. And the critical thinking help us to be active on some of the stages of the modern history of Ukraine. And we didn't give a chance any of our presidents to become authoritarian leaders or became the people looks like Putin or close to him. Today, my country is in the flames of war. This unprovoked intervention by the Russian Federation is caused only by the fact that Russian leaders and the absolute majority of Russian people doesn't accept the collapse of Soviet Union. Violence against other nations, groundless deprivation of their rights to identity, physical extermination of the will to political participation, murder and destruction of the political elite have not disappeared from the basic set of tools on the Russian state. Russia's imperial ambitions have no other platform than the ideology of violence, propaganda, and the physical and uncompromising destruction of everything that is able to resist. Because these awful things and war crimes and genocide happened as a tool to stop resilience of Ukrainians in a field. Democratic state and authoritarian and totalitarian regime will fight against each other because there can be no compromise between the right to live and identity on one hand and the right to kill for the sake of the subordination of whole nations and territories on the other. All we can say today is that liberal democracies do not enter a fight against each other, but they are forced to react to defend their rights and values. Ukraine and its people make up the frontier of this struggle today. Unfortunately for me, for my family, for my husband, for my son, but we have to play this role, and very truly we don't play the role. We have to survive. That's why we have to defend ourselves even on the battlefield. Today Russia is using similar methods against civilians as it was many years ago in Soviet Union. The war in Ukraine is a full-scale fight for independence. After 30 years of full independence, we have to continue this fight. New generation of Ukrainians pay with their lives for the right to existence of the entire community, nation, and for the legitimized right to manage their own territories recognized within the border of 1991. The United Nations, that was founded after the end of Second World War, was not in any way capable of reducing the degree of Russian aggression. But the fact that the word nation is a part of the name of this organization is already good for us. Belonging to a nation does not sound like a crime. Identity culture, the desire to govern its own territories on behalf of the people through lawfully elected representatives, in a right, not a crime. But it is this crime Russians have tried to accuse Ukrainians of and are still doing it now. There is well-known expression that winners can be judged. The Soviet Union has never been confirmed for the atrocities committed by this totalitarian regime against Ukrainians. And as many other nations, I have to highlight that Ukrainians was not the only one target and will not be the only one country or state from a neighborhood countries which will be under the Russian attacks. But Ukraine is a battlefield all the times during many pages of our common history in Europe. The world barely remember the huge price Ukraine paid for the victory over Nazi Germany. Some 61 states of the world in the Second World War and affected 80% of all human beings of the time. More than 110 million soldiers were enrolled in the armies of the country that fought in the war. According to various sources, the total number of military and civilian which were dying during that years, it was from 50 to 75 millions. About 8 or even 10 millions of them were Ukrainians. This is almost a quarter of the total population of Ukraine at that time. Can you imagine the price? And I hope that the modern Germany will remember that Ukraine is was the battlefield, and Ukrainian nation paid the hugest price for stop Hitler on those days. And now we have to stop together Putin, because he is going to continue fight against democratic state, and Ukraine will not be the only one. More than 20 million people went through the repressive system of Soviet correction, so-called labor camps, Gulag. And Ukrainians were most numerous among the detainees. Did you hear about so-called filtration camps on this eastern part of Ukraine, which are working, unfortunately? And 1.2 million of Ukrainians had this experience with filtration camps during last few months. We are talking about 21st century and filtration camps in a central part of Ukraine. 1.6 million of Ukrainians were relocated from Ukraine to temporary occupied territories and then to Russia, without their political will to be relocated. All of that people were kidnapped, and 200,000 of them are children, which already are under the Russian mental attacks, because Russians decided to develop a special education program, how to re-educate these children from to be Ukrainians to be Russians or Soviet Union identity type of a new generation. I don't know, but it's genocide. That's why electoral democracy is a very good system of protection your own people internally. Ukrainians showed that they fought for electoral democracy for many years. There are only brief highlights to shed light over history and answer the question why Ukraine sought independence and why Russians failed to capture Kyiv within 48 hours in February 2020. And that if we try to understand why it happened, why Russia didn't capture Kyiv, because Kyiv's authorities are the blood of the blood of the nation, and the voters which voted for that president, voted for that parliament, and all of that politicians are responsible on their people, not responsible for third parties like our foreign partners. They have to be on the central part of this battle, political battle. That's why the surprise for European partners or even American partners was that our president, our parliament stayed in a capital and continued to work according to constitutional obligations. How to be if your country will be under the attack, physical, military attack from the foreign countries that just did their job because they were elected through free and fair elections. And I believe that free and fair elections is a part of security for the nations. And I believe that we have to think about that on a global level, not just about procedures and so on and so forth, not just about disinformation or cybersecurity, because it's a puzzle of one big picture. Electoral democracy and free and fair elections is about security. 30 years ago, in 1991, an all-Ukrainian referendum of the independence of Ukraine was held. There were only one question: do you confirm the act of declaration of independence of Ukraine? And more than 90% of Ukrainians answered yes. And this position was the same in Donetsk Oblast, Luhansk Oblast, Crimea, Sevastopol, the majority of the people of Ukraine decided to be independent. And this is irreversible process. Like with Lithuania, when the Russian Duma decided to adopt a decision that the act of independence for Lithuania was not value is not value anymore. So, but this is history. We can reload the position of majority of Ukrainians to be independent and to develop the country according to European standards and to become in the future a part of EU. After 1991, Ukraine has a student revolution in granite, the Orange Revolution in 2004, and the Revolution of Dignity in 2013-14. What I know to sure, Ukrainians fought for the establishment of a democratic regime of the government. I didn't come to our other country from, sorry, I didn't, and this regime wasn't come from somewhere. It was a hard work of civil society, our international partners, capable partners, and it was a choice of Ukrainian nation. Each of these events was a manifestation of popular outrage against the attempt to deprive citizens of participation in the political life of the country or against the violence of human rights. In 30 years, no economical reasons have ever taken millions of Ukrainians to the streets. Every time, these events further alarm Putin's authoritarian regime. In fact, the aggressive policy began in 2005. It began with the gas wars, which have always been a tool for influencing the policy of Ukraine. And now it demonstrates the dependence of the European Union that has become a hostage to alternative sources of fuel supply. Today, Ukraine have achieved unprecedented support from the Western free world, and its struggle against the authoritarian regime in Russia. Also, propaganda and energy dependence are still significant impact factor for world policies. A war in the heart of Europe that can be watched online is hard to miss. But this is not about feeling pity for thousands of victims. It's about understanding the global threat coming from counting business as usual with the Putin regime. The empire cannot stop its aggressive policy on its own. It needs a powerful ally of partners to help it. On the other hand, Ukraine, which is no longer publicly recognized by the Russian authorities as an independent state, shows it's incredibly subjectively. When the entire world's intelligence survives predicted the total loss to the world's second largest army, Ukraine was prepared to become the largest. Over the course of the past months, more than 400,000 of the men returned home from abroad, where they used to live and work, and they came back to fight. My husband is a part of that group of the people, and I didn't see him for more than 110 days. And my son didn't see him too. I fought for many, many years for electoral integrity in Ukraine, for development of good practices and electoral code with a gender quota, with proportional party open list, with electoral rights for peoples with disabilities, and so on and so forth. And we did a great job. We had a big progress. We did many PVTs during many campaigns. We joined in the data, we monitored the process, and we did a great job in between elections because it's about sustainability of electoral democracy. We can't just observe the electoral process like that and forget about reform in between the processes. But now it does not matter. If we will not continue to fight on the global level for Ukrainian interest to survive as electoral democracy, because the fail of this battle will be the best example for authoritarian and totalitarian regime in other continents or other potential regimes in Europe, that it's possible just to broke everything because you have more weapons. That's why I'm going to ask you, don't be tired to fight for electoral democracy, and don't be tired to watching what is going on in Ukraine. Sorry for my emotions. Thank you, and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, Olga, for this very emotional and powerful speech. I think we all really needed to hear this, and I want to ask you to ask questions from Olga, and please help me. I will translate the questions because the audio quality is not the greatest. So please help me. The floor is yours, Garvan.
So, Olga, I want to ask, because here in Hungary and many other countries, we're not currently facing military attack, but our democratic institutions are under, subversion and corruption. In many ways, under a situation that Ukrainian democratic institutions were in the preceding days. And what advice do you have for civil society in Poland, in Hungary, in Bulgaria, and other countries, so they can become as strong as Ukrainian civil society has become?
What do you want me to say, Olga, or did you understand the question?
Yeah, I heard the question. Thank you very much. Because my hand doesn't work. The questions, but this time it's okay. I think that the main question around sustainability, because it's not about braveness. I was very young in 2004. I was a student and I participated in the Orange Revolution. And I could forget about this role that the electoral democracy or elections has to be defending all the time. My good professor, Larry Diamond, he wrote a book, Democracy, and he has very strong message about your question and such questions as yours. Democracy is not a state of being, it's a process of becoming. In 2004, I thought that democracy already failed because the second round of presidential elections in Ukraine was falsified. And Central Election Commission already published official results of the elections with the result as people decided who has to be a president of my country. And then we understood that everything depends on us, citizen people, and we use the peaceful manifestation against that authoritarian regime, which already decided to be developed very well in the future. If Yanukovych became a president in 2004, we can already be like Russia or Belarus. I don't know, it may happen. But we decided that after the Orange Revolution, we will not trust or believe to each of the politicians in our country. We have to develop NGOs or think tanks to be capable enough and to be powerful enough and to be visible enough to have influence. as for advocating electoral reform, for example, or to give our advice to society about current processes, and society trust to other part of society, like NGOs, like civil society organization, because we are a part of that society. But it's a very philosophical question how to be enough brave. There are many options. First of all, you have to be brave if it's a question of your surviving. Like now, because of war in Ukraine, Ukrainians are very brave people, but not because we have such ethnical type of DNA. No, it's only one option. You have to fight, and that's all, or you will die. There is no other options. But for civil society organization, the increasing of our and your power depends on your sustainability. I saw many cadences of Ukrainian parliament, and there are many MPs which saw me, first of all, in TV, on TV channels, then they became powerful, very well known, and so on and so forth. And I have to talk the same about my organization and such institutions as mine in Ukraine. And the other question, it's about publicity and trust. Because if your work does matter for your society, none of politicians will be fight with you publicly. Your capacity, your vision, your visibility can be even higher than many other politicians in your country. And it's your power, just use it in the right way. Another question is about expertise. Because many of NGOs try to be time to time visible, but they can produce decisions or solutions. They are going to produce just recommendations, very general recommendations. And if you want to be enough powerful, you have not just criticize or propose something in general wording. You have to propose the key and solutions for this decision, like a norm or amendments to electoral code, like development IT tools, like prototypes for the work on elections, and just to show this exercise or this example to your authorities or your society. So this is a question about capacity and deep expertise. And the third question, it's about international support. I'm not talking about technical support or resources. I'm talking about, first of all, to be on the same page, to talk as much as it possible, and to be honest about your state. To be honest when you criticize the processes inside, and to be honest when you have to highlight that something is happening in a right way. So this is like three stages of solutions. Capacity, it's not something new. Expertise, because you have to find solution, not just recommendation. And the third one, to be visible and to build partnership on the international level.
Thank you, Olga. Mindaugas, yes, you could.
Yeah, if we say 6 months to a brighter future, and then we look at Belarus, we look at Russia, and assume an optimistic scenario that things will change there. What would be your advice? What should, I don't know, the government or the foreign partners or whoever do to, in the first 3 months or 6 months, to put some railguards in place so that the country with the opportunity to open up for democracy does not degenerate back to where they are now? But question is about the first 6 months, because you can develop through years. Maybe it will lead to something. But what the new government or the new people who come in power, what can they do in the very, very short period to safeguard and then develop further for these authoritarian regimes after the fall?
Thank you for your question. Just clarify, are you talking about Ukraine or Russia and Belarus? What they have to do during the
They have a successful win, but I'm talking about Russia and I'm talking about Belarus, so that these countries don't become democratic for, I don't know, for two years or 5 years, but they will set on the rail towards democracy.
Okay, first of all, I have to separate Russia and Belarus because it's totally a different situation. I believe that Belarus can be enough independent in the future from Russia and to be a part of European region, not geographically, but mentally, and to use the international European standards for their democratic processes, but in the future. What is the problem for Belarus now? It's to build capacity as a human resources to use this small window of opportunity to reload the power in the country. Because the request from society not to have anymore this authoritarian regime or authoritarian leader is already is a part of Belarus society. We know about very well. In between 9 million of Belarus people, we have more political prisoners than in whole total Russia, like which 140 million citizens. We can compare just political prisoners, but it's about trying to do something. And the problem of Belarus political and civil society leaders that many of them are now abroad. And as Ukrainian history give us a chance to understand how it is going on, they will have a few days for back to the country and to be ready to use this opportunity in a peaceful manner to change the previous regime without Lukashenko, of course, without Lukashenko. And you know that Ukrainians do not have any aggressive position against Belarus society because Belarus society doesn't support Lukashenko anymore. Unfortunately, near 1,000 missiles were used by Russians from Belarus territory, but we have understood that this is because of Lukashenko's dependence on Putin, his personal dependence, because Lukashenko will survive only as a part of this battle. At the same, Belarus society is not accept this position at all. We have some sociological researches. We know what is going on in Belarus society, and we believe that the most problematic question for them now to prepare and to be ready, like to have enough human resources for reload the power in Belarus. And unfortunately, I don't have such vision for Russia at all, because Russian society was under the huge propaganda for many, many years. And they truly believed they are doing a good job when they are killing Ukrainians. And I don't believe that this society will be ready to vote during free and fair elections for good boys or good girls, I don't know, to vote for a new president, new president. This society is ill. And you know, the democratic processes and democracy, it's about participation, not about exclusion. So Russian citizens didn't react at all for this war in Ukraine. And for me, it's like a criteria that they will not ready to accept like new democratic leader or liberal democratic leader for new Russia. In between now and new Russia has to be like a stage to lose the battlefield against Ukraine. Then they may have even worse authoritarian leader than Putin, because it's about surviving of whole regime. And Putin is not the only one reason of this, unfortunately. And then we have to develop accountable system for Russian like stakeholders, Kremlin leaders, Putin personally, this system, and so on and so forth. I'm talking about tribunal against aggression. This is historically important to write a dot that Putin's Russia, current Russia, with support of Russian society, is wrong to use weapon against other nations. And this has to be a part of the judicial process and judicial international system. And future tribunal against aggression has to adopt the decision, which will give us a chance to turn the page, like it was after the Second World War with Germany. And only then it is possible try to build democracy in Russia, but not through just free and fair election and electoral process, because without the position of society to participate, it's very difficult to vote for someone at all. So sorry for that, but I don't believe that Russia will be a democratic state during year 2 or even 5, because it has to fail this like imperialistic mission of Russian leaders. That's why I use the example of Soviet Union, because it was new stage of this historical imperialistic aim for Russian leaders. Sorry for that. And what I see from the opposition from abroad, Russian opposition from abroad, they are very selfish, and they do not think how to solve the war, how to solve the problem with the war. They think how to live comfortably in the EU and other countries.